The following is for educational and entertainment purposes only, and viewer discretion is strongly advised before we begin. According to Inner City Press, millions of people have watched Ashton Kutcher play the smart tech investor, the charming prankster, or the silly heartthrob. But on a humid spring morning, that same man appeared in a Manhattan courtroom as a witness, not as a celebrity, in one of the most unsettling celebrity trials in contemporary history. Sean Diddy Combs was accused of everything from organized abuse to sex trafficking, and Kutcher, who had previously been a part of Diddy's notorious Hollywood rap group, was forced to testify in silence. Filled the room before Ashton's words, left the court in disbelief. Kutcher wasn't only there to put Diddy out of his mind, he was there to reveal something that no one had anticipated, a shocking admission, a betrayal, and a secret that could alter everything. This is the story of the day Ashton Kutcher became a witness. When Ashton Kutcher was called to the stand on day 9 of the trial against Sean Diddy Combs, the courtroom was unusually tense, even for a case that was already filled with shocking revelations. There was a different kind of silence, and Kutcher didn't enter like a Hollywood star accustomed to red carpets and fanfare. Instead, he entered like a man cornered, his tie tight. The media had been speculating for weeks that Kutcher's name might surface because years of photos, investments, and partying with Combs had resurfaced in the wake of Diddy's arrest, and Ashton's team had been working tirelessly to clean up the timeline. But no amount of spin could explain his damp brow and eyes searching for an exit that didn't exist because he was under oath and not on a soundstage for the first time, could alter the evidence the prosecution had uncovered. Kutcher's name was found in financial records, security logs, correspondence, and, most damning of all, a few videos taken from Diddy's compound. The prosecutor asked, "Do you recognize this image?" Kutcher glanced at the screen. It was grainy, but it showed him holding a drink and his shirt slightly unbuttoned. As his testimony progressed, a carefully constructed public persona started to fall apart. Kutcher spoke calmly at first, but there was a tremble in his tone. "I was friends with him," he said, "and I looked up to him. He was laughing in a dimly lit room with faces blurred for privacy. I do," he said, swallowing. That was at 2009's Diddy's White Party, the first of many confirmations. I didn't ask enough questions, but he explained how the so-called New Hollywood Rat Pack had formed. In the beginning, it was partying. Then it was business, and then it was something else. Kutcher said there was a turning point when it went from private events to what I would call curated experiences. When the prosecution asked Kutcher if he had ever seen criminal activity, he paused and said, "I didn't know what I was seeing at the time, but now that I know better." He acknowledged that Combs frequently had a separate team working the back rooms who confiscated phones, directed guests to specific areas, and collected NDAs on site. Ashton even disclosed that he had signed one of these NDAs. I simply assumed that multiple NDAs over the years were standard when he said, "Everyone did it." However, the court played audio from a 2013 party at one of Diddy's houses, during which you could hear music and laughter. Ashton's voice then said, "I don't think we should be filming this," followed by the words, "Seriously, this is too much." "Relax, it's all taken care of, they already signed," remarked another. The prosecutor turned to Ashton and said, "Who were you referring to?" His eyes darted to Diddy, who was sitting at the defense table, expressionless. "Guests," Ashton finally answered. "Some were models. Some." At the end of part 1, Ashton's testimony was about complicity regarding a culture of silence that rewarded those who played along and punished those who asked questions. It became evident that Kutcher had once been one of the former, but now in front of a judge and a court of law, they weren't informed of what was going to happen. In the afternoon, Ashton continued his testimony about the notorious years of the New Hollywood Rat Pack, which included me, Diddy, Danny Masterson, Wilmer Valderrama. He said we called it a new kind of brotherhood, but in hindsight, it was a machine. At the time, they seemed glamorous, with private jets to secret locations and all-night parties in mansions without windows or clocks. But these stories now took on a sinister tone. At those parties, Ashton said, "You had to be approved." I didn't ask who was approving, but the prosecutor pressed him. "Did he ever, not with my own eyes," he exhaled sharply. "But I heard things, and I ignored what I heard. I laughed things off. I told myself it was just rumors." He spoke about a private yacht party in 2012 where Diddy brought out a group of young women, the majority of whom were models or influencers. He said, "They've all signed, you're safe." I remember laughing, but I shouldn't have. He discussed how the dynamics of the Rat Pack changed, saying that Danny became darker, alluding to Masterson becoming more controlling and paranoid. At that time, Diddy and Danny were very close, and the court played video from Diddy's 2009 White Party, which Kutcher co-hosted. He acknowledged that it was my idea that we were. He told the court that as time went on, he even started keeping secrets. "You don't rise in Hollywood without learning when to shut up. I was making millions. I had a brand and that." He also explained how guests who asked too many questions weren't invited back. On the surface, we were promoting charity, but I believe we were promoting something else entirely behind the scenes. Jacques Holmes even mentioned a troubling encounter between a female guest and another celebrity whose name was redacted during court testimony. I asked her if she was okay, and she replied, "They told me not to talk." That stuck with me, and Ashton started to cry a little. There was a guest list and there was a blacklist. Ashton Kutcher, long regarded as the likable goofball, tech-savvy, investor, and devoted husband, was now revealing layers of a Hollywood secret that few dared to face, and it was only getting darker. I was here because I was a part of the circle, and I saw enough to know something was wrong, and I didn't do enough to stop it. The gallery sat in stunned silence. The prosecutor asked Ashton, "What's up?" Offa hesitated, but he said, "It's an event. Diddy would host," adding, "private exclusive phone staken, guests blindfolded." Sometimes it was presented like that. The term freak-off, which had been rumored in industry blogs and anonymous posts for a long time, became part of the courtroom lexicon. He explained that he was invited to his first one in 2005 and that, "I brought a date within 30 minutes and I regretted coming." He wouldn't go into detail about everything he witnessed, but he did remark, "I thought it was a theme." The prosecutor displayed a detail from a confiscated laptop. Ashton's name was on a digital guest list tagged Greenlight. "It meant I was trusted," he said, adding, "I don't know what I did to earn that, but I knew that there were hidden cameras, people who looked scared, and rooms you didn't walk into unless someone tapped your shoulder." The courtroom listened as Ashton explained how difficult it was to step away. "You're not just backing out." He also explained how he was given documents to sign, NDAs that were drafted not only for guests, but also for high-profile entertainers, security teams, and caterers. "The NDA I signed in 2010 was 28 pages long, but he said I signed it anyway." The same week, Ashton claimed 3 investment deals mysteriously fell through. "I received a call." He said, "You're backing out of a network, a power structure, a system." He recalled a time in 2014 when he tried to stop going to a party, telling Diddy that it wasn't for him anymore. He responded, "You don't quit. You're in or you're out forever." Ashton concluded with a chilling admission that he was worried about my career and my family. He didn't need to raise his voice. All he had to do was stop returning your calls, and that was enough to ruin someone. "You made someone nervous." The courtroom then broke for recess. However, Ashton Kutcher was finally speaking the truth for the first time in decades, so no one moved. When the court resumed, the attention shifted from parties to something much more strategic: the business and financial relationships that had subtly supported the lifestyle Ashton Kutcher and Sean Diddy Combs had built. Wasn't just about what transpired behind velvet ropes. As he described the network that underpinned it all, I noticed a pattern. Many of Kutcher's deals overlapped with names currently embroiled in Diddy's scandal in 2009. He had long been regarded as a shrewd investor, having positioned himself as Hollywood's bridge to Silicon Valley through early tech startups to massive venture capital plays. Engaged in more than just entertainment, he explained, saying, "I was introduced to founders' fund managers, and Sean had connections most people didn't. He could open doors that even the biggest venture capitalists couldn't." He explained how Diddy introduced him to a network of global financiers, brand developers, and nightlife moguls. Didn't just throw parties, they turned them into businesses. Branding companies masqueraded as clubs, investment groups masqueraded as lifestyle blogs, and marketing, surveillance, and recruitment all combined into one. One name kept coming up: an anonymous investor connected to a number of Kutcher's projects, who was later found to have direct ties to Combs overseas. Ashton also acknowledged that there were shell companies, which he never fully understood. They told him it was to protect intellectual property, but in retrospect it was likely to hide something. Business arms' financial records revealed large transactions labeled only as consulting or event services, but the destinations of those funds frequently aligned with dates of notorious private gatherings. When asked why he didn't look further, Ashton said, "The W asked too many questions because the money was good." The prosecution outlined a timeline of investments, including Kutcher's participation in a prestigious tech hub in downtown Laszlo. Angelus and his partnership in a nightlife-focused app that shut down soon after receiving Kutcher acknowledged that he had received updates from the app's leadership, but that the user data they collected, including names, locations, and biometric information, had been covertly sold off. "I didn't know," Ashton said, "but maybe I should have." He also detailed one unsettling incident in which millions of dollars in funding that linked to accounts now frozen under federal suspicion, a pitch deck for a new app created by one of Diddy's associates, was shown to him in 2016. It was meant to help talent connect directly with producers, but there was a page about discrete background checks and personality profiling that unnerved me, so I skipped that one. It turned out to be more than just a tale of bad parties. It was a full-on infrastructure. Ashton Kutcher's circle grew smaller as the years went by, and the bond that once bound the so-called new Rat Pack together started to erode, not because of scandal, but because of the names you'd see on magazine covers holding awards on stage, while behind the scenes they were cashing checks signed in silence. Control made it obvious that loyalty had a cost in this Hollywood fraternity, and betrayal had repercussions. After 2014, he claimed that Danny Masterson became more paranoid. Wilmer Valderrama began to distance himself, and I began to hear rumors. He wasn't merely referring to media rumors, though. As Kutcher claimed that those close to the group were subtly breaking, Kutcher stated that after he started turning down invitations to events, investments, dinners, and other things around him, projects that were greenlit abruptly went dark. This was not because we disagreed, but rather out of fear. One friend stopped attending everything, and we assumed he was simply burned out. He then called me and said, "You know too much, get out." He described a chilling encounter in early 2017, when he ran into Diddy at a charity event in Gala. He hugged me and told me I'd been missing out. And then he said, "You should be careful about what you don't remember." That line stuck with me. Deals fell through, and some executives stopped returning his calls. It felt like I was being quietly frozen out. Shortly after, Ashton claimed to have received a USB drive in a blank envelope at his workplace, which contained video from a party in 2012, nothing illegal, just embarrassing. I received the message. He acknowledged that fear began to control his actions, and he tried to back away gradually in the hopes that no one would notice. But every time I pulled away, someone did. Ashton described a night in 2018 when he received a call from a friend, alerting him to a civil suit against one of the Rat Pack members. They said, "Don't let this get to you, we'll take care of it." He said that something would come up, such as a tabloid leak, a hacked email, or a threatened lawsuit, and I had rushed to protect my name and my family, but the deeper concern was that he couldn't protect his conscience. Handle it. At that point, I understood that this was no longer just friendship, but rather damage control. And he started to discreetly distance himself from all parties involved, transferring money, cutting connections, and renegotiating contracts. But even after that, the ghosts persisted. Tech founders would leave clues about Diddy's name, and business associates would still mention it with respect. "I felt like I was being followed by a shadow I couldn't shake," Ashton said. And the worst part was, I helped build it. By 2020, Ashton Kutcher had done everything he could to clean up his image. His investments were presented as charitable. His media appearances leaned wholesome, and his family was the focus. When I heard about the first raid, Ashton said, "I wasn't surprised. I was relieved, but the relief didn't last." Although his life was staged like a postcard, underneath, he was running and wasn't alone. The entire entertainment industry was changing as the pandemic forced stars to retreat. Scandals started to surface, and eventually Diddy's name was no longer whispered but shouted. He recounted the day federal agents knocked on the door of one of his business properties with a warrant, requesting access to archived footage, correspondence, and travel logs, which I provided. Soon after, the subpoenas, headlines, and social media accounts posting pictures long since forgotten brought Kutcher's name back into the mix, and this time, no PR team was able to contain the damage. The biggest blow came in 2023 when video of a party that Kutcher and Combs had hosted in the Hamptons surfaced. It wasn't graphic, but it showed influencers being led by handlers into forbidden areas. He also explained why he refrained from speaking in public during the initial firestorm, saying that he was afraid of the legal fallout as well as how deeply it would hurt people. On camera, Ashton said, "Just keep them calm until we start." When that clip came to light, everything changed. He initially claimed in court that we were conducting a branding shoot, or at least that's what I believed. But the public didn't care, and for a man who had built his brand on charm and trust, the hit was devastating. He lost endorsements. Ashton explained how his children started to question why strangers shouted outside their house, and why news trucks camped outside, and that he had to explain things to them. Tech partners started to distance themselves, and investment funds discreetly removed him from board listings. Mila, his wife, was reportedly furious and pleaded with him to leave years ago, to which he replied, "I didn't listen. He couldn't even explain to myself, and did not with a bang, but rather with a Hollywood A-lister who was once thought to be untouchable now, witnessing his empire crumble brick by brick. Not because of what he did, but rather because of what he refused to see, and worse, what he refused to stop." Ashton's voice lowered as the topic of conversation shifted to Danny Masterson, whom he once referred to as a brother. No one in the courtroom needed to be reminded of Masterson's fate. He was found, guilty and sentenced. But what no one had previously heard was how deeply ingrained he was in this circle, how far-reaching the influence was to keep him safe, and how Ashton Kutcher was far more involved than he had acknowledged. We came up together, and Ashton started sharing everything at work parties. The years they spent on that 70s show, he explained to investors, were not just about filming Offset. They were also about networking. Danny was involved with Scientology. Kutcher was connected to